In a seemingly endless sea of overdrive pedals, sometimes I wonder if it really doesn't get any better than this. Hey everyone, I'm Jack Fossett. Welcome to the channel. This is the Boss Blues Driver BD-2. We're going to talk about it, we're going to play through it, and this is a pedal that, I could say that it needs no introduction, it needs no words from me, but obviously I'm about to talk about it, so that wouldn't really make sense. Now, this pedal has been around since the mid-90s, and when you think about it historically, when it came out and the impact it would have had, it was at a time when hard rock, and particularly like arena rock, was kind of fizzling out in exchange for grunge, but beneath that there was a thriving blues scene. It had certainly been revitalized by Stevie Ray Vaughan, and even several years after his death, his legacy was certainly still living on and very popular. Eric Clapton was coming out with some amazing blues playing in the 90s. From the Cradle is one of his best albums, in my opinion. And of course, there were other artists playing blues as well. So there was a marketability for something that had blues on the title. Now, it is important to mention this is not a blues breaker. It's its own thing. And I think one of the things that Boss didn't expect but sort of stumbled on is, first of all, it's an awesome overdrive. It is one of the best overdrives out there because it just does what an overdrive should do, right? The point of an overdrive is to make your tube amp sound like it's overdriven without needing to crank it. We're going to talk a little bit more about why this one's special in that realm in a moment, but I think the fact that it was called the Blues Driver and that it was such a versatile pedal made it more marketable to other genres than Boss might have ever expected. And the reason is because blues in general inspires so much music, and a lot of artists like to kind of have that connection to something that came before them, even if they're not hugely into, obviously somebody like Eric Clapton, massively influenced by blues playing. A lot of other rock players would certainly have a blues influence, maybe not quite so overt, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't want to kind of honor it. And seeing the fact that it says blues on there and just is an awesome overdrive kind of can make you feel like you still have that sort of foot in the door, foot on the path. You have some connection to the past. And blues, of course, has so much soul. It kind of has an earthiness, a naturalness to it that I think a lot of players aspire to have even in playing other genres. Now, as an overdrive pedal, so I mentioned, right, it sounds like a tube amp that's broken up. Not in like an amp modeling kind of way, but it simulates the sound of a tube amp when it gets pushed. I was actually surprised the first time I ever heard of Blues Driver because it was more aggressive than I expected it to be. But then I stopped and thought, like, well, some of the blues tones I'm associating with are things that more came from a tube screamer. Now, technically, that's what a tube screamer is supposed to do also. This is one of the best overdrive pedals I've ever played as far as getting that simulated tube breakup sound. Now, it's not an amp modeler, and it's not necessarily transparent either. It's very transparent on lower gain settings. Once you get the gain up, it kind of develops a little bit of its own character in a cool way. But tube amps, when they're really pushed, they develop this little bit of sort of chaoticness, and there's almost like a fuzzy aspect to them, and this really nails that when you get the gain pushed all the way. It has a little bit of that unrefinedness in a good way that reminds me more of an actual tube amp broken up. It also has a very, very wide frequency range. It blooms like a tube amp would as you turn it up. The EQ on a tube amp does not stay the same depending on where the volume is. So on most tube amps, when you turn the volume up, you're not just getting a louder signal. Like the treble gets more trebly, the mid-range gets fatter, the bass gets boomier. And this kind of has that. It's sort of, when you hit your amp with it, it kind of feels like it boosts the whole EQ section a little bit like that. It's got that wide frequency range. It's got that slightly chaotic breakup that also just sounds great at lower levels. It gives you the really nice edge of breakup thing. And in that sense, one of the reasons why I would be so bold as to say that, hey, is this the best Overdrive ever? Oh, that's just a clickbait title. Well, then don't click on it. I don't like clickbait titles either, but that's what people click on. I had never actually played a Boss Blues Driver, believe it or not. However, I have played the Keeley Super Fat mod, which is one of my favorite Overdrive pedals, and this pedal was one of the ones kind of inadvertently, in part, that gave a rise to some of the boutique modders and builders who would later become very successful. Also, supposedly, the Keeley Katana Blues Drive has some Blues Driver inspiration in it, which is another one of my favorite pedals. But all that being said, this also just sounds great on its own. It does the concept of what an Overdrive pedal is pretty much as good or better, I think, than anything I've played, right? It gets that sound. It gets that sound like your tube amp is rip-roaring a little bit more than it is at a manageable volume, and also adds just a little bit of its own character while doing so. That, to me, is what an Overdrive pedal is supposed to do, and there are just few out there, I think, that do it the same way that this does it. Now, that being said, best Overdrive ever, kind of the concept of an Overdrive. This wouldn't necessarily be my favorite Overdrive pedal, so I want to make that distinction. I like it a lot. I'm not saying that in a knocking it way, and, you know, I kind of put down Tube Screamers there. I love Tube Screamers. I'd use a good Tube Screamer for the rest of my life and be totally happy. It's more a matter of like, okay, what is an Overdrive? What is it supposed to do? And this one, according to the description, really does it. Now, the last thing that's kind of a bonus for me on this one is how well the tone knob works. So for a lot of the video, I have the tone knob pulled back. In the jam in the beginning, you saw just kind of cutting the top end a little bit. But one of the things that I found is even when you turn the top end all the way up, it just gives you a nice grind. This is really zeroed in on the right frequencies as far as where your sweep is there. And I think that that is really useful because there are many overdrives, particularly less expensive overdrives, where with the tone knob, you really just find the one spot that works, right? You don't really have a lot of tone shaping options on many less expensive overdrive pedals. You just got that one spot that doesn't sound bad. And then the rest of it's kind of... This one you could actually do some cool tone shaping with. So I think that really makes it very, very versatile. So, you just heard it at jam in the beginning. Now I'm going to do a quick demo with both of those guitars, which are going into different amplifiers. The Stratocaster is going into the clean channel of my Marshall JVM, and the Les Paul is going into my Fender Bassman. So you can hear not only how it sounds with different guitars, but also different amplifiers. With the Les Paul going into the Bassman, I am also going to test out the tone a little bit to show you some of the tone shaping. Let us know what you think. What would be your best Overdrive ever, first of all? Leave that in the comments. Do you think that this one is worthy of best ever status? And again, remember what I'm referring to here. Best ever meaning it embodies the idea of what an Overdrive pedal is supposed to be based on its definition. So let us know what you think. I'm Jack Fossett. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the video.